This is the Nomad Futurist podcast, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and transformation. Connect with us, share your thoughts with us at nomadfuturist.com. Let's get this started. Here are Phil and Nabeel. Hello. Welcome to Nomad Futurist. This is your co-host Nabeel Mahmood from Kailua Kona, Hawaii.
This is your co-host Phillip Koblence from Montclair, New Jersey.
I'm Santiago Suinaga. I'm the CEO for Infrastructure Masons. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
And Santiago, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. Where are you out of? Are you Santiago, Texas or San Antonio, Texas?
I'm based in San Antonio, Texas. I'm originally born and raised in Mexico City from a Spanish background. My family comes from Spain and Mexico, but I've been here in Texas for around 4 to 5 years.
Brilliant. So tell us about your background. Spanish influence, moved to Mexico, first generation out there, second generation. Do share that story. Share that migration or that journey.
Yeah, sure. So on my mother's side is second generation. On my father's side is around like 3 or 4 generation. But yes, I was born and raised in Mexico City and spent most of my life and career in Mexico, and recently moved to Texas, to San Antonio. San Antonio is kind of, I will say, one of the most Mexican cities within the US. So we have plenty of friends as well from the same background.
Brilliant. Now, growing as a young man in Mexico, and I want to take this as to the story of you getting into the data infrastructure sector. So I see that you went to college in Mexico, got a degree in business administration. How did you end up picking technology as a professional?
Yeah, I imagine your goal when you joined college was to be a pioneer in the digital infrastructure industry.
So it's funny around that because I have listened to different interviews and people telling the story about how they got immersed into the digital infrastructure. Most of them, it's kind of by accident in some cases, right? Or just coincidence.
In most cases.
In most cases. I will say in my case, it's kind of yes and no. I will say that my father, that was an inspiring figure for me. He was always this kind of person, very curious about technology. So I remember as a kid back in the 80s, I was one of the first kids that has a computer back at home because my father was very techy. And I remember bringing some friends and they were excited just to come around to my house and playing some of the initial video games that were on the computer, these old Macintosh, right? Those like kind of black and green screens, this helicopter and they were shooting to the helicopter. So it was funny because my father introduced me to technology, right? He was more into a financial guy working the Mexican Stock Exchange, investment banker, but he was passionate about technology ever since. Then after, when I was in high school, my father started running a business around the Millennial Toolkit, right? That we will change in the millennium, right? And there was kind of this bug on computers, the Y2K. So because he retired from investment banking and finance, and he put together this startup, and then another one for voice over IP. So when I was in college, actually, I felt him and he introduced me how to configure routers and stuff around some of the initial sites. I'm talking about late 90s, early 2000s, right? And I was in college and I wasn't decided what path I want to follow because my bachelor's is in business and then I did an MBA. So I wasn't very technically by profession, but by experience, my father taught me how to configure the router because we were placing those appliances next to the PBX on the companies to save on the long distance calls. And that's how my first immersion to what's a data center, right? So when I was still at college, I found this opportunity in KIO, which is the largest data center operator in Mexico and Central America. So basically, one of my mother's friends was one of the ones that put together the business plan, knew the founder, and so I got introduced. So I started as an intern, basically on the marketing and sales side of things. But surprisingly, I was very young back then, and this was very early. It was 2005. But I have some background working in data centers still because of configuring those type of devices. So people were surprised that a young kid, how I was kind of, I have a general idea of that. So I was selling data center colocation to banks and enterprises back then. And then I got closer to the founder of the company, the CEO back then. And the COO, the one that was running the operations, left the company. And I was kind of, I was like the interim role supervising operations. And nonetheless, my background wasn't technical. I have been always this kind of curious guy that always likes to learn how things run, operate. And I asked many questions, right? Suddenly I was operating the data centers formally. I was also involved in design. So because of my, like I mentioned, right, my background is more business, but I went through some certification because suddenly I was a very young person having a team of 80 engineers, right? That they were smarter than me in terms of the knowledge of operating data centers. So I wanted to train myself as well. So I took some courses, CMET, TCT, even Uptime Institute, like the accredited tier designer, so I can get more theory about data center operations. Eventually, because of my background of being a sales operations and then understanding the audience and the stakeholders, right? Whenever I remember when we were doing tours in the data centers and you're bringing some CEOs, some CFOs that they were not technology related, I understood that you need to translate to their language, right? To their financial language, to their business strategy language. And so what the data center was doing for their business, right? And that opened me the door to organizing tour with investors. And eventually I was leading the data center business to become the CEO for the company. So it was a very interesting journey because I would start as an intern, eventually became the CEO, right? And spent there around 20 years, 19 years to be fair. We even went through the process of selling the business to a private equity firm 3 years ago or so. So from basically starting almost the business until we basically took it to a next level, right, with private equity investors and so. And in the meantime, around 2018 or so, I was just reading and navigating through some posts in social media and the internet, and I read the story about Dean Nelson founding the Infrastructure Masons Association, and I find it fascinating, right? So back then, I didn't hear that much about industry associations connecting individuals. So I enrolled myself as an individual and to get, know more about the industry, networking, initiatives that they were fostering and so. And after 1 or 2 years, I decided to bring KIO, my former company, in to have more coverage, visibility, influence, and so on. It was very, very, very nurturing because we were able to get some industry benchmarks, connect with industry leaders, what the hyperscalers, the largest companies in the world were doing so we can polish our product and so. And I've been participating in some of the advisory councils, initiatives. I was one of the lucky ones that were present when the Climate Accord was born. And I remember that was a game-changing moment in my mindset because I remember I thought it was going to be another AC meeting gathering like all the others. I was excited. It was during the COVID pandemic. I believe it was like, late COVID pandemic, but still was like February 2022 or so. So we haven't had a lot of in-person gatherings during that point of time. So I was excited to get back together with people. And so Christian Belati, one executive back then in Microsoft, hosted us at his own place there in the Seattle area. And there were many leaders there. There were the president of Microsoft, AWS, Google, Meta, Apple, Equinix, the Realty, Align Data Centers. There were Stack, EdgeConneX, Bird, Eva Schneider, you name it, you're right? And I was thinking, oh, this is great. People in the industry, peers, getting together, collaborating for a common effort. And then they mentioned about that the hyperscalers have committed to net zero goals to 2030 and 2040. This was even before AI. So the journey seemed easier than it is today. And I find it fascinating because they mentioned, hey, we have committed to these net zero goals. And it's a hard commitments. And we have here the supply chain. We must align because by doing ourselves alone, it's a very complicated journey. So let's work together to commit in the common ground efforts to make this happen, right? So I was one of the lucky ones that were present there. I commit with my company back then to the effort. And then it grew exponentially. I remember there were like 20 companies at first, and then it evolved to be like 270 companies committed to this effort. And I was constantly following up the iMasons initiatives and so. And then Jeff announced his retirement and he told me about it. I went in some conversations and was thinking about suggesting somebody to take the iMasons role. And so if I could find somebody in my network. And when I was reading about the profile, because this was a CEO position, not just the executive director one, because also was supposed to spend more time within KIO. And basically they wanted to take it iMasons to a next level. And so I thought to myself, well, why not me? You know, I've been for almost 20 years sitting here waiting for somebody else to figure it out and solve some of the challenges we have in our industry. Let somebody else figure it out. And I'm here in my comfort zone. So it was a difficult decision. You know, we, after, 19 years running a very, I will say, interesting company, right? A leading company in Latin America with great roadmap, a journey to go. I think the easiest way will be just keep it business as usual, right? But I said, well, no, let's play more an active role and try to participate and try to give back to the industry, partnering with great associations like a Nomad Futurist and some others, right? That they're doing game changing on the industry, right? Because we can all together in the industry just be very busy trying to develop, deploy capacities and like that. But if we don't take care about the constraints we have in our industry, we'll explode sooner rather than later. So I'm here. I know there's great expectations. I hope I can contribute with my own expertise and experience to the industry, because that was one of the key roles they were looking after the board in iMasons. By leading this association is not someone that just would like to have the theoretical part of the industry, but actually somebody who has really operating data centers, right, for quite some time and know in firsthand what are the constraints, the pains, and especially coming from an emerging market with a international business experience, because this problem is not only in the largest market in the world, which is the US, but it's globally, right? Mm-hmm. So we have the same type of problems in Europe, in Africa, in APAC, in Latin America. So providing that global perspective was important. So I hope I can help with that. And that's why now I'm running the infrastructure Masons team.
There are two thoughts that I have. First is that was the longest answer to tell us a little bit about yourself that I think we've ever had in the 2 years of Nomad Futurist. So congratulations on setting
exactly.
the
And I think Santiago is a heck of a storyteller. I mean,
it's
you had me at hello.
Transfixed. It might be that San Antonio accent. I don't know. It had me transfixed. I think one question that I have, there are 2 points. One that I want to mention up front is like your role at Infrastructure Masons reminds me of when Dick Cheney was hired to find the right candidate for vice president. And he's like, oh, I thought of the right person, me. The second is you don't hear very often this concept of someone, especially in this day and age, starting at the ground level as an intern and then rising up to be the CEO, especially as a young person fresh out of college, maybe still a college student, frankly, at that time, and going into, essentially a sales or marketing intern and then rising to the level of CEO without any real, official, because there wasn't such a thing, education in the subject matter that was at the core of what that company does. What is that experience like? That concept of having to kind of learn as you do, which I think is incredibly important and indicative of what makes the best employees in digital infrastructure, or the people that learn through experience. I think it's the best way to learn, even with education for our kids in all different areas. But what was that experience like? And could you have ever seen yourself as an intern 18 years later being the CEO with multiple exits under your belt?
That's funny because my original intent entering this company was to save sufficient amount of money for 6 months to go and study abroad and spend some time in Europe. And then those 6 months converted into 19-year journey. And this is for the folks that are out there that basically they kind of getting to know the digital infrastructure and the data center industry. That example is because it's fascinating, right? So kind of entrapped me with passion to do things out because I remembering getting into my first tours and so and say, well, this is amazing. You know, how this is powering most of the activities we do in our daily lives. And remember, this is what before, the mobile phones and so, because it was in 2005. I think the iPhone didn't exist back then.
For those kids out there was a time before mobile phones. I know it might not seem that way, but it existed.
But it's a matter of translating the purpose
Mhm.
because sometimes, and I think as an industry, we haven't been that good marketers outside of our industry. Sometimes we're very key and very kind of hermetic. Goes back to the secrecy of, oh no, we shouldn't tell anyone this is a data center and how it does because it's critical and so. But when people beginning to understand what's the purpose behind the digital infrastructure data centers, that's how makes you want to learn more. Perhaps I'm just those kind of curious minds because there are different mindsets. But I will say that I was fascinated when I realized that data center were like the behind the scenes of a movie or the backstage of a concert, right? Because most people, they just like to live the experience without thinking what's behind to deliver that experience. And that's what's happening normally here, right? People just do 100, even thousands of transactions in the daily life. If you will think, on a regular basis, people with devices, potentially with their phones is the thing that they most interact with, even more than potentially their loved ones in terms of minutes spent, right? So imagine that critical part of your daily life. This is supported by this infrastructure. So you don't know what's behind the scenes, but there's a plentiful of resources, invested capital, deployed infrastructure, individuals working 24/7 to deliver that experience, and all that working together for you to have an experience and live your daily life doing transactions, checking emails, social media, ordering food, Uber, receive medical appointments, treatments, even boarding up a flight. So all those things that people don't know what's behind, this is supported by the infrastructure. So back to your question, Phil, I was impressed. And I think for new generations, especially, they like those jobs that are meaningful. And if you're contributing to society in many ways that, as you will say, when the COVID pandemic hit, right, one of the industries that were supporting most of the activities in the world was the digital infrastructure, right? Without the digital infrastructure, I think that if the pandemic had hit us like 30 years before, the story would have been very differently, right?
Even if it was 10 years before, just given the amount of connectivity that was out there at the time. Imagine if it hit when you were still on dial-up or on DSL. I think one of the things I just want to point to is the concept that you have of your curiosity. A lot of it, I feel, our theory of it, the Nomad Futurist theory of it, is that our generation has thrived in the digital infrastructure age because we're the last generation that kind of straddled the before digital world. And now you knew a world in which all of these transactions didn't happen at your fingertips and you had to go to the bank and stand in line and go to a teller. Even the ATM, I remember when that was like a thing that my parents didn't trust because that was like a machine and they wanted to go stand on the line and talk to the teller that they've known for 20 years to get their $10 out of the bank. And how much of it do you think is that, your wonderment about all of these things that the digital infrastructure world supports was born out of the idea that you saw it happen. You saw the world before that was even feasible. And now you're amazed by it because you have the ability to contextualize the fact that it even exists.
Yeah. So to that point, the before and after, I think most of the people working in the digital infrastructure were privileged, right? In terms of we understand and know how things work, because for the common human being right now, things just happen kind of with magic, right? Like even for people that are thinking that the information is floating around in the clouds just with signals, right? Rather than physical infrastructure sending and storing information. So when I was, and I was the lucky ones to see that evolve, because before, when I started, only big companies, banks were using those for their enterprise processes. And then we see how the world has democratized the use of information and applications. And so when the devices came out, and I think that was a game changer, but we're in the midst of another game changer, which is the AI. So we haven't seen anything yet. With the AI in place, it's like we have seen only the tip of the iceberg, what's supposed to come. And if you think about that exponential growth we have with the cloud is nothing compared to what we will have with AI. So all the challenges, all the problems that we have will be only bigger and larger. And that's why I think organizations like Infrastructure Masons and Nomad Futurists are most needed in these times, right? To kind of equalize and balance the different stakeholders, right? Because we have communities, we have regulators, we have hyperscalers, we have operators and the users ultimately, right? That we need to bond all of that together for the industry continue to thrive.
Absolutely. I want to switch gears just for a second. I know we are talking a lot about what has happened over the last decade or two and what's yet to come. We haven't even broken ice, like you said. This is the beginning of time, is the way I look at it right now. What's kind of inspiring about your journey, besides the fact that you are certainly one of those exceptions that has actually stayed and excelled in one job for about 20 years, and you've gotten to the highest possible rank within an organization and have had a successful exit. What's really interesting and intriguing and sort of validates the point of the mission that we are on is the fact that you got into this space purely by an accident. And that accident was really personal, hands-on experience with using and leveraging technology. So talk us through that, whereby do you have any siblings? I'm assuming you do. And if so, were they exposed to it? What has their journey been like? And what got you excited besides it just being an internship and saving enough money to go to Europe? Right? Basically, what was that curve like is what we want to try to focus. And the reason for this question is because we are big advocates of building muscle memory, right? Early exposure, early experience, early education creates good habits and creates these career pathways. That's the journey that we're on. And you're a prime example. Like you got that exposure early on in your life and it became good muscle memory and you became curious. It became a lifelong learning goal because there was that level of complexity and that level of fun to be a part of the sector. So do you mind shedding a bit of light on it?
Yeah, so I have two brothers and they're in different career pathways. They're not in technology. My youngest brother is graphic designer and my middle brother is kind of more in the touring activity, right? And we, all the three of us, we were immersed in technology early on because of my father's, as I mentioned earlier. And, but I was kind of, like by accident, right? I'm the oldest and I was helping my father into the business and he was very passionate about technology. So maybe I inherited that curiosity from my father or so, but it was just a matter, like you mentioned, like accident. But when you start developing your kind of or learning and developing those skill set or muscle memory, as you call Nabeel, I think it becomes more natural, right? So I will say that based upon your point, I think if we try to increase awareness at that early stage, it will be easier for the industry to grab talent that will feel more naturally associated with the industry, with the processes and so, right? Because we have found many individuals, right, that have joined the industry at the later part of their careers. But it's like learning a new language, right? It's easier when you're younger because your mindset is kind of more open or prepared and that kind of muscle memory training. So I will say that yes, of course, in my career, entering at that early childhood, I will say, and then during high school and college and so, is kind of make me, stickiness to the industry, not just because I like it and I like the way it solves the purpose, but it's how it is what basically what you do best, right? You have experience working in that, the industry. It's like this career pathway. So I think the earlier, the better. And we'll have less constraint training the talent because earlier generation are easier to train and they learn fast.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. So for our listeners, you left and Dean and I, we've had several conversations over the years, and particularly when he actually started this hunt for the CEO role. And that was kind of very interesting to see the vision and the mission come through and finding a candidate like yourself to come in. The question that I asked him back then, and it will be a question I'm going to ask you now, with a great career as a CEO of KIO and a potential exit, why would you want to come for a nonprofit? What was the driver behind it for you personally?
There's some point in life in your career you want to have a more meaningful existence in terms of providing to a greater value to the industry, right? And when I was thinking about, say, well, there's a plenty of companies out there, right? There's not many like the ones we have, nonprofits actually solving things for not just one company, for one sector, it's all across. So I will say that that was very meaningful, game changing, and say, as if I can contribute in a greater way, that will be very interesting. And I don't know, there's something as well deeply inside when you hear inspirational leaders like Bean and some others during these gatherings and meetings, listening to what they're doing is just, it grabs you and attracts your interest, right? So like, I think the industry as well to get more talent, right? We need to increase the awareness with inspirational leaders, right? So the people joining, they know that their contribution is meaningful to the world. It's not just another and don't get me wrong, right? There's a lot of jobs and industry out there, right, that are doing a meaningful work for the society, right? But the digital infrastructure is one of those industries that touches every other industry, right? Because right now the world relies more than ever in technology. And we have experienced that like 1 month or 6 weeks ago when we have that thing that happened with the CrowdStrike. And so we realize that the world is no longer prepared to functionally back to basics manually, right? Basically, if you don't have the systems running, everything is paralyzed.
Which you knew if you were like a Delta passenger during the CrowdStrike issue.
Or United, I guess, too, Phil.
Oh,
Don't forget them. I think the ones that got away were like Ryanair.
my favorite,
Southwest.
my favorite tweet from all that. Can you call it a tweet anymore? My favorite X from that time was when Southwest tweeted, "How do you like us now?" Because they were they were raked over the coals when they had an issue because of their lack of technology. And it turned out that, like, how do you like our Packard bells now? I think was how the tweet raked, because they didn't have the CrowdStrike and Azure and all of that integration, and they were able to continue to process stuff in their fairly manual, haphazard way. So there is something to be said for being able to do it the old-fashioned way.
Absolutely. So, Santiago, we're really excited that you've joined Infrastructure Masons. Infrastructure Masons has been on a great mission, and there's a lot of synergies between Nomad Futurist and Infrastructure Masons. We have been in conversations for a long time with Infrastructure Mason, and it was so lovely to meet you. As a matter of fact, on the day the announcement was made in Cannes, and have had the opportunity to talk to you in person, figure out what the future is. So, as you have clearly illustrated earlier, where we are heading, this is the beginning of time, right? Artificial intelligence is changing the sector dramatically. And what's next? Quantum compute, quantum networks, quantum security, right? Fusion energy. I mean, there's so much good stuff that's going to come out in the very near future. What we're left with is a human capital deficit. What we're left with is addressing the social accord and the climate accord. And I think you guys are part of that mission. You and I, when we met, and your journey is just amazing, right? I mean, you've foundationally and your roots, you can sense the passion that you're passionate about giving back to the community. You're passionate about passing the legacy on to the next generation, doing the right thing for the right reasons, which totally blends in with our mission, our charter, when Phil and I started this initiative. I think it's time that we tell the public a bit of what's happening. What are we doing? So would you take the honor in sharing at a very high secretive level? Well, that's what we're known for.
Yeah, you're just between
what's
us.
going on?
No one's gonna hear this. Just between us. What are we doing? What are we doing?
It's my pleasure. So yeah, for the audience listening, right? We have been in conversations, Nabeel, Phil, Mark, Dean, and myself and other people of the team in iMasons, right? Because we're finding a lot of synergies within the two associations and organizations, Infrastructure Masons and Nomad Futurists. So we were discussing, hey, how can we partner together to better serve the industry and the needs of the industry, right? And we feel very identified with Nomad Futurists under education initiative. And as Bill Clayman mentioned once, you cannot have sufficient education. The moment that we have sufficient education, it will be a great outcome, right? So why not partnering both initiatives to better serve the industry? So we'll be announcing soon a strategic alliance and partnership within Infrastructure Masons and Nomad Futurists. to better serve those type of initiatives by working together and have a greater coverage, leverage on our own organizations, expertise, experience, resources, and so I'm very glad for that to happen, and we're feeling this great atmosphere working together. And thanks a lot for the opportunity and the confidence, Nabeel, Phil, Mark, and all the extended Nomad Futurist team for opening your collaboration.
Brilliant. Yeah, and we're looking forward to it. I think one of the key takeaways, I think we have had this conversation at multiple fronts, is we are big believers of leading by example. And this alliance in itself is a testament of what we've been able to accomplish. We believe that there's a lot of good that's happening around the world. We also believe that people's hearts are in the right place and they want to make a difference. Yet we cannot make a change. And this alliance is actually a testament. And it's going to be evident that together we're going to be able to make that change globally, not just in one particular region. So thank you very much, Santiago. We are very excited for this partnership and this alliance and continuing on this journey together.
And I think it's perfect. I mean, you're basically the embodiment of the generation that we're trying to create, right? As a kid getting into it, not necessarily formally educated in the task, and just letting your curiosity lead you to heights that you could have never imagined and making a significant impact. And I think the transition that you've had from KIO to Infrastructure Masons kind of points at this concept that it's difficult for one person to make a change. It's difficult for one company to make a huge difference because you are beholden to investors and your fiduciary responsibilities, where as much as you may want to focus on something that is for the greater good, you have to focus on your balance sheet at the end of the day. And the only way to really make that change is to be this kind of facilitating body, this connective tissue that brings an industry together, brings people together so that the rising tide raises all boats. And we don't just operate in our little fiefdoms, we work together. So I think it has just enormous potential. We've thought so for some time. And I think you being brought into Infrastructure Masons is the perfect catalyst to make this happen.
Thanks, Phil. Basically, you nailed it. There's no better way to explain it.
I would say I would drop my microphone, but I can't because it's dangling from this arm. So
yeah. And I've always wanted to say this, that there's no I in team, and together everyone achieves more. Bam.
There is an I in Infrastructure Masons, though. There's an I in infra. There's no I in Dean. There's no I in Dean. It's perfect.
Very good. Santiago, what's some of the key takeaways that you want our listeners to pay attention to as we embark on this whole AI and machine learning and the future of compute?
I would say that AI will totally change the way we interact in many ways, the way we work. And I know that there are concerns around many people, right, about AI, but I will say that AI is like kind of that the history has told us it's the new industrial revolution, right? Back in the first industrial revolution, people were concerned about losing some of their jobs, right? And the AI is the same, but the AI will create more jobs, will give you more time back so you can spend more time with your loved ones, with the activities you like, with your hobbies and so. And I think it can make the world more efficient, especially time-wise and even resource-wise. And I think it creates opportunity in this industry for people to come and be more aware of the industry. I think it's a fascinating industry. There's sometimes people, they are thinking what their career path they will choose. And I think this is a tremendous industry. Trust me, I've been 20 years already. And the reason I have stayed is because it has been an amazing journey. And there's plenty of roles because it's not just the technical ones. That's a misconception, right? This industry has roles for most every kind of background profile. And so, and I think
if you don't believe it, just check out Santiago's LinkedIn profile because he's held every one of those jobs.
Yeah, you'll see. Yeah, sales, technical, finance, and so on. And that's an example. It's an exciting journey. I think that this industry also provides a lot of inclusivity to embrace many people from different backgrounds, different parts of the world, different interests, and so. And it's also an industry that individuals can make a decent amount of money. I have seen some articles from the Wall Street Journal that says what industry you can get a salary of 6 figures without a college degree. Well, welcome to the digital infrastructure, right? So I think we need to increase the awareness so the society and communities embrace digital infrastructure and to lose the fears around AI and digital infrastructure because it will change the world, but it will change the world in a very good way.
I think it's well said. I think one of the things we have to fear is the enemy of progress, as they say. But I think awareness is the enemy of fear. So making sure people understand how this stuff works is inevitably the only way we're going to kind of remove their fear and mitigate it a bit.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. So this has been amazing. And I am very thankful for the collaboration. And there's going to be a lot of news coming up for our audience in the near future as to what collaborative efforts Infrastructure Masons and Nomad Futurists are putting together.
Absolutely. Thanks for the confidence and for your collaboration and for the invite. Nabeel, Phil, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. And stay tuned because there's a lot of things coming from this collaboration, Nomad Futurists, Infrastructure Masons. You will see that the industry will get a lot of benefit and the society for us working together.
I know most people think we took the summer off just sleeping and partying on the beach. I know Nabeel does a lot of that in Hawaii, but we've been hard at work to bring what's coming to you, and it's going to be exciting.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. This has been great. Nothing lasts forever. Markets will come back, currencies will rebound, businesses will go on, and we will all move on. That could happen next week, next month, or next year. At Nomad Futurists, we're confident that those who prepare rather than panic will come out of this stronger. Thank you for joining us. This has been brought to you by Nomad Futurist. Check us online at nomadfuturist.org. And thank you for listening and subscribing, as well as your continued support.